Liz, welcome to Get Shit Done.
Thank you for having me, Alex.
You are my second Liz of the day for the podcast. We try to do in bulk recording.
Oh,
The
it's
other
just if I
Liz,
decide to find all the lizards.
all the Liz's on this Friday. But you both have completely different trajectories that are both badass. That Liz started the world's largest language translation company that was bootstrapped to $1 billion, and I was like, okay, girl,
Amazing.
very cool. But
Great.
we're here to talk about Liz with Soona. So we're really excited today. And before we kick it off, I love to just do a quick energy check in. Just to normalize, I think so often in entrepreneurship, people are like, everything's okay. And it's like, is it? And maybe it is, but why? So if you could rate on a scale to 1 to 10 of how you're feeling energetically in the business in this moment, how would you rank? 10 being the highest.
Energetically in the business, I'm probably like a 7.5 right now.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is there are a lot of things that are really clear to me, a lot of things that are really working that I feel excited about and that I feel energized by. But I think at any stage in a business, especially at a stage where you have as many employees as I have, the responsibility I often feel to have all the answers is really high. And we are actually at a really interesting point in our journey where, I'm really questioning some decisions that we made last year and kind of thinking about either a undoing or divesting from certain initiatives. And that brings about a certain amount of uncertainty that I think would sort of deduct 2-ish points from my vibes overall right now.
First of all, I love everything you just said and why I like doing energy check-ins and vibe check-ins because I think what we don't talk about enough that you just hit on is the fact that like you can make decisions and change your mind. And
Yes.
I mean, that's life too, but so often we beat up on ourselves like we have to be perfect, we have to have all of the things. What is top of mind for you right now? Like what is something you're like this is maybe a decision that we felt was great at the time, but maybe right now it's not so much. Maybe that's not the direction anymore.
The big one that I've just been weighing really heavily recently is some of the decisions we made around AI. We truly took nearly half of our engineering resources last year and funneled them into AI initiatives and projects. And as a result of that decision, we kind of stepped away from more practical projects around product maintenance, around infrastructure, around other types of product planning. And the reality is that the AI market is a very low value, low price point market. The customer, for a lot of reasons, expects everything to cost $20 a month because that's what ChatGPT
GPT.
costs.
Yeah.
Yes, and the reality is that it costs a lot more than that to deliver the products that AI can provide. And so I, while I continue to be excited about how AI can help our customer and how AI has a lot of potential in the business, I am no longer excited or see it as an economic growth path for us. I actually see it as potentially a risk to our growth path. And so I have been really weighing, the appropriate allocation of resources to those initiatives and have already started making some shifts that I think will be really good for the business. But it does create, anytime you as a leader change your mind, well, yes, it is really important to be honest and transparent and clear with your team about why you're changing your mind. There's also naturally, I think, sometimes fear that maybe the wrong decision was made and that this new decision isn't going to be the right decision either. And so, what I've really been meditating on and spending a lot of time thinking about is, when we change our mind, it's because we got smarter and because we learned new things, not because we were quote unquote wrong. It's because we didn't know then what we know now. And anytime you know more, you can do things differently and you can do things with that information in your back pocket. And for the first time in a really long time, I feel like I know a lot about AI and I know a lot about what's possible and what's not possible. And I feel really confident about what makes sense for us and what doesn't. But it's still scary. It's still scary to be a company that says, you know what, I don't think economically this is a race I want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And to sort of step into a different energy and into a different strategy.
I love this. And it just reminds me of like, I don't think things happen by accident. And sometimes, and this is life, and especially entrepreneurship, it's that maybe you experience this now. You and your team did all of this development and you learned a lot. And right now it's like, ooh, this might not be the best direction for the business, but I guarantee it's going to come back around. It's like maybe in the next year or 2 years, and you're like, oh, that's why. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So I'm excited for you, and I'm glad that you're giving yourself that grace to say, you know what, maybe we should course correct, because that's what this is all about. So I like to take it back because I love context. And, our OG listeners know I say this a lot. The sociologist in me is, so often we like to compare ourselves to other people's journeys, but we don't realize how they got to where they got. And it's
Mhm.
so unique. So, what was little Liz? What did you think you were going to actually do? If you think back to your younger self, did you always think you were going to be an entrepreneur, or is there another career path you're hyped about?
As a young girl, I don't think I knew what entrepreneurship was, which is strange because my family had businesses. So on my mother's side of the family, we had a canoe outfitter. We rented canoes in Minnesota. And then my father's side of the business, my grandmother owned a store, like a grocery store. And so I spent a lot of time hopping between these two businesses as a child. I don't think I thought that people were in my family were entrepreneurs. I thought that people in my family were part of the community. That was sort of how I saw their community involvement, how much people came in, how excited they were to see my family or see my grandmother. And I never kind of placed that as a job title, right? I just saw it as like they work in the community, they provide service to the community. And it's so funny because I think as a result, little Liz was very convinced that I was going to be Barbara Walters because
Ooh,
every
love
night,
that.
yes, that was sort of like the dream, the ambition, the vision. I would come home from school, and every night there was a period of time in the '90s when Barbara Walters was the first woman anchor of a nightly news program, and I had never seen a woman on television who was in charge. And what I mean by in charge is, able to ask questions to the most powerful and important people in the world, had a seat literally physically at the table. And I really identified with the energy of what she had access to and the way she carried herself. I didn't realize like that it was about the energy at the time. I just thought I wanted to be on television. That was sort of the energy. And so as a result, like that carried all the way through my preteens, my teenage years, all the way into college. I studied broadcast television because I truly thought like that was the path I was going to take. Entrepreneurship came full circle 10 years into my career when one of my grandparents had passed. My grandfather had died and he was 93 years old. And I honestly didn't know who would be at his funeral. I thought to myself, like, his family is, other than his kids and his grandkids, like, there's not, his siblings are gone. A lot of his friends were gone. And what I was so amazed by when I walked into his funeral that day was that his church was full of 25 years worth of customers and employees who had worked in the community at his canoe outfitter. It really sat with me for so long. Months and months and months, I just thought to myself, like, I really am drawn to this idea of business as a vector for community, business as a way to build community, but also to facilitate community. I never thought that my grandfather was like the architect of anything, but I could then see looking back on 25 years of business how he had architected community for those people. And so that's actually how all of this came full circle, where I thought I was going to be Barbara Walters, went to journalism school, pursued a television career for a decade, and then left my television career to pursue entrepreneurship. in my late 20s because I really thought that I was called to it through my family.
I love that. So then we, what was your first bout in entrepreneurship? How did we step foot into that
Well,
first
other
thing?
than being a shop kid who was trying to sell t-shirts and whatever else on the shop floor, my first bout of entrepreneurship was really trying to sell myself as a commercial director and starting a traditional production company. So, after having spent time editing television and working in the industry as an editor, I became really passionate about trying to help other brands, other businesses understand how could you take the content that you create for traditional television and adapt it for online use cases. And so in 2013, I started my first business, which was a small little shop. At the time, it was just me, and people would send me their television ads, and I would recut them, repurpose them for different use cases online. At the time, the only place you could upload a video was on YouTube or Vimeo. But what was so amazing about that insight was that within a year, Instagram started uploading videos, then Facebook. And we've now seen that like video basically is the internet at this point. And so I grew that little company to a few $1 million in annual revenue. We had a team of 10 by the time I ultimately did sell the company. And it was sort of just taking something I inherently, somebody once gave me the advice, and I think it's really good advice, like figure out what you are naturally really good at, like naturally have a talent and an insight for, and align that with what gives you energy. And that's a really good place to start a business. Because if you're naturally good at something, but it doesn't give you energy, it's going to drain you. If something gives you energy, but you're not naturally good at it, it's going to feel like a grind. But if you can find something that you're naturally good at and it gives you energy, that's probably a good combination because it's a stamina game. And that advice was correct.
It is.
Entrepreneurship has been a stamina game.
Absolutely. I love this. And, you know, friend and guest on the podcast, Carrie Kirpin, I learned through what she does at the Exit Whisperers that, I mean, 0.8%, 0.8% of women have ever exited a business. So when you exited that last business, what was that experience like for you? And did that lead you to Suno, or did you take a break in between, or what did that look like?
Yeah, it was a complicated journey because around 2018, I've been running the business for about 5 years. We were succeeding, but I started getting really curious about e-commerce. And I found myself really energized by e-commerce. I found myself energized by talking to clients that were working in e-commerce. I found myself energized by researching and reading about it. And I realized that my energy for that was sort of pulling me in a new direction. And I had didn't have as much energy for what I was previously doing. And so I sort of exploratorily talked to some friends who had sold their business, and they recommended to me that I hire a business broker. People are very familiar with the concept of like companies selling, but oftentimes it's like a really complicated idea of like how precisely does a business actually sell. Turns out there's these folks out there sort of like at the highest end of business investment bankers that sell companies, but at the lower end of like small businesses that are generating a few million in revenue annually, there are these individuals who are brokers of businesses. They represent businesses like they would represent a real estate transaction. And I hired a business broker who, for a year, like really coached me on how do you like package up a business to even sell it? Like, how do you make sure that you have the right processes in place, the right people in place, the right documentation in place? And all of those things kind of came together so that we could then package up the business to go try and sell it. And we actually took two strategies. We approached partners and customers. So we said to partners who were things like ad agencies and broadcasting companies and talent agencies, hey, Liz is interested in divesting. She wants to go pursue other things. But, obviously you've had a ton of success partnering. And two of our partners actually put in offers to buy the business. And so that's how that truly came to be. And I did interviews with both parties, and we did some conversation and negotiation back and forth. Ultimately ended up choosing Standard Broadcasting, which is was a really good fit for me at the time because they really were exploring more around original content and how to be providing more ways for original content to expand and grow. And it's funny, like it took almost a year and a half to sell the business, but then I remember like signing the paperwork at the end of October in 2019 and being like, oh my God, like tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I'm not going to own this company anymore. And, I had an advisory role for a period of time and that was really important. But no, I literally took like 4 weeks off and then I started working on Soona. So um, not something I recommend, by the way. Do not do that. It's not good for your stamina to an earlier point. And I do think that while I have no regrets about starting Soona, I do think that, at this point I've now been working for myself in some capacity for 12 years. And I've now worked for myself longer than I worked for anyone else. And I can honestly say, like, there's so many gifts to that. But it's also been really, really personally risky and also really personally challenging at times. And I oftentimes reflect on that period of time and think, like, if I'd taken just like one more month off, I maybe wouldn't be like so frazzled on a Friday night when the day is over. Who knows? You can't rewind time, but that is
Yeah.
something I do wish I had done.
I love that you mentioned this because that's, yeah, again, I don't think there's mistakes, lessons more than anything. And that's something I feel like I did. It's after each, for most of my businesses, I feel like I was always on to the next thing, like what's going. So my last company exited in 2019, and right before that I had resigned was, okay, what do I want to do now? And I just remember thinking, I have to think about the next thing because that's where my brain goes. But in that process, which OG listeners know, and I was telling you before we started recording, like my nervous system started shutting down because I was
Mm-hmm.
only speed I knew was fast and go. And at some point, it literally, my body was like, absolutely not, no more. And it was my wake up call was my therapist saying, either we change lifestyle up and how we're doing things, or we're going to be put on some pills. And I'm like, I truly believe in medicine. And if I have a choice here to not have to take pills, then let's not do that and just change your life up. So I love that you gave that insight because I feel like I hear that from a lot of people. When we're used to being in entrepreneurship mode, we just go to the next thing. But that grace for ourselves is super important. So you get to Suna 4 weeks later, and you know you already have been in the content game, but how did you identify the opportunity for Suda in the market?
It was really through conversation with people whom I trusted and respected. I was meeting, when you're an entrepreneur, you meet a lot of other entrepreneurs. That's just entrepreneurs attract other entrepreneurs.
This
That's
is how
how,
this podcast works,
yes, there is
basically.
like a magnetism to how we all functionally operate in the world. And so I was meeting a lot of founders and I was meeting a lot of CMOs at founder-led companies. And they would say to me like, oh my God, thanks so much for helping us with this ad campaign, or thank you so much for the referral on, whatever need they had. But do you know somebody who does e-commerce images? Because it turns out this is incredibly hard to find. And I was like, to be honest with you, let me do some research. Let me see who I would send you to. And I found myself like really surprised by the fact that the existing options on the market were either like really expensive agencies, so e-commerce agencies that would add this on as part of building a website or transitioning a website or supporting a website, or I would find that people were just using kind of a network of freelancers, and oftentimes freelancers didn't have the knowledge and information about what was like best in class e-commerce imagery to actually help sell products. And so I couldn't forget it and it kept coming up. It was one of those things where sometimes a good idea won't leave you alone. Like people just kept asking me about it. And it was because I was in the industry, but it was also because it was adjacent to what I was already doing. And so uh, people were constantly asking me about it. And I was constantly finding myself saying, I'm sorry to tell you, like, I think your best option is probably to just keep working with your agency. And I felt so demoralized by that. And over time, I started bringing this to my business partner, Haley, and I would say, like, you know what, how could we fix that? Like, if we were to be creative about it, if we were to imagine it differently, how would we imagine it? What's some ideas of what we could do together? We actually went on a trip together to Palm Springs, and over the course of that trip, kind of the first iteration of what Suna could be was sketched out on a series of pieces of paper. And that, wireframe of initial concepts eventually became what I used to hire the first engineer that helped me build the first prototype. And then that first prototype is what I needed to get into Techstars. And so it's funny, it's like I just kept following the curiosity. I kept asking myself, like, what's one more thing I can do to validate if I'm still interested in this? I think sometimes what happens is people have a business idea and they just want to be in business so bad that they kind of jump into the business. And I've sort of had an opposite approach here because I knew how hard business was and I knew like what I was signing up for a little bit more. I took the approach of what's one more thing I can do to gather my conviction and my courage about this. And so
Yeah.
every single week I would do something that would either give me more energy or not. And after about 4 months, it was like totally clear to me there's just no denying. People need this, people want this. I should do this. And I feel energized by the idea of doing this. And actually, it's so funny, Alex. The other day I was looking at some initial, like early photos, like of that time and what I was doing and where I was going and where was I traveling and who was I hanging out with. And I honestly look at pictures of myself in that time and I can feel how on fire I was about this. Like it was like I was in love with it. It was like a new romance in a way. And you can see it in the twinkle in my eye in these photos. And that's to me like something that I also really appreciate about this time that we're living in is you do kind of get to capture and live these entrepreneurial experiences in a way that I don't think we used to be able to, especially if I think about, how precious. I have one artifact from 25 years of business in my grandfather's canoe shop. It's this little canoe
So
handle
cool.
that sits on my desk that they used to send customers every Christmas to remind them that summer was coming eventually.
Very
and
smart.
um, it's so funny, but like I have this one artifact and like two or three photos. And now, like with my business, I have so many things that are representations of this journey that I feel so grateful to have given me the energy to keep going.
I love this because what you're breaking down, the Ikagi method type of thing, it just sounds like the entrepreneurial Ikagi. It's like, what are you good at? What energizes you? What do you love to do? And then also, what is a need, right? Because,
Mhm.
there's five main things we've heard over and over that every entrepreneur we've had on this podcast who has successfully scaled, these are the five things they do. And number two is customer feedback, is getting
Mhm.
out there in the market, talking to someone. And I think that like spark you get in that momentum is also from that, what I call validating or invalidating assumptions. I'm very similar. I feel like when I was starting Get Shit Done, I was on a mission to invalidate all of my assumptions. I was just like,
Mm.
hey, I want to know where I'm wrong, right? So I'm
Yeah.
not building something based off of my own kind of narrow view on something. It's like, what is the
Of
opportunity in the
course.
market? And by actually getting feedback, that's when we learn, oh, everyone's talking about funding and that's what people talk about. But actually, when you hear the nuance of what people are saying, they were actually talking about income and revenues. Oh, there's not a lot talking in that space. So I love that entrepreneurial ikage you have going on. So you had already built a business before, sold the last business. So you have some experience there. But what do you feel when you started Suna were things you did early on that were super unscalable, but were super critical to your growth?
There are so many unscalable things that we did in the beginning. And honestly, I try to like do one really unscalable thing every year still today, like
Love that.
past 8 figures, because I think the unscalable things teach you a lot about what's at the heart of why people buy things from you. And I can explain that in a second. But like one of the really unscalable things I did was I decided that when we got into Techstars, I was going to do a weekly vlog on being in Techstars because it was something that I couldn't find when I was curious about Techstars. And I thought to myself, if I can kind of bring people along the journey of going to Techstars, a lot of people are interested in this. A lot of people apply to this. Like I'll create some YouTube content and a weekly vlog on Techstars, which was incredibly manual, incredibly tedious. I had to come up with themes every single week. And oftentimes, really the only promotion for Soona in that was like if I was doing something that week in the program that was I could talk about that connected to the business. But strategically, it was such a big deal because that YouTube vlog led to my first 4,000 subscribers on our email list, right? And so
Wow.
I needed to do this like highly unscalable thing to build the email list so that when I launched the product, I would have someone to email besides the 100 people I talked to. And I think that's the thing that I really think about now is when you're in those early days of, pre-product or pre-launch and you're trying to build interest and energy around your business, pick something deeply unscalable, but deeply spreadable. And what I mean by that is like that asset became something that Techstars was actually using for some stuff, and like other people could email to friends. It wasn't something that was just like kind of a flash in the pan, one Instagram post. I'm not saying a single Instagram post can't go viral, but you got to repeat it. You got to repeat the activity again and again and again. Today, like unscalable things that I do is like I still write a founder's memo every single month to every single person on our email subscriber list. And so while I could, of course, go to ChatGPT and just say, hey, ChatGPT, write me a post about, what content trend is going on right now or what commerce trend is going on right now. I find it really instructive to take an hour out of my month every month and go, what am I really thinking about? What am I really hearing from customers? What do I actually think they're worried about right now? And how can I connect that to something in the market that might be valuable to them and do some research on that topic? That kind of activity now feels incredibly early days and also like an incredibly mature choice to make. And I think for founders, sometimes making the choice not to do the fastest thing, but to do the highest value thing for your customer is the choice that I recommend you make because they feel that choice. Just this week, we have a very large fashion customer. You have almost certainly purchased their shoes. Everyone listening to this has almost certainly purchased their shoes. And you know what? I was like, I think I'm just going to go have like fly to their city for the day and just spend it with the customer and just in like, let's go have a long lunch and talk. And I don't really have an agenda. I just want to see like, what do you wish we were doing? What do you think we're doing well? What do you think we're not doing well? What's going on with you as a person, as a mother, as a human in the world? Like, can I help you with any of those things? Deeply unscalable. I cannot visit all 25,000 Soona customers. But I thought to myself, like, oh, you know what? This choice to have lunch with this person, um, it pay dividends in ways I can't even see right now. Right. And so those are the kinds of like highly intentional, unscalable choices I still make today.
I love this because I think it's so easy. There's a lot of buzzwords in entrepreneurship, growth, scale, all those things being those. And you get founders who get hyper obsessed because they want to get to those points. Yet, to your point, like sales is one of the most important things that you have to do as a CEO of your
Mhm.
business, as a founder. And sales is relationships. Relationships are not super scalable. They're not supposed to be. They're not meant to
Mhm.
be automated. And even what you just said was like, I can't go to all 25,000 of our customers, but let me go to some of these where we can know we can make impact and just sit down with them, ask them what it is that they need. What do they want? How can we
Mhm.
solve this? And that goes a really long way. And a lot of those scalable things for you paid off because you got to 1 million in revenues with this business in 11 months, which is
Yeah.
insanity. So you said you did a lot of founder-led content as a non-influencer that built your email list up to 4,000. What are some of the other things that you did during that time that got you to that level of growth?
Well, one thing was we truly hit a need in the market. I mean, I don't think I could have manufactured an email list on Earth that could meet the energetic demand that was just sort of existing underneath that business, right? Like sometimes you truly just hit a nerve. And I think in this case, we did hit a nerve. But the thing that I think we really did, and this is such an important story to tell, is when I first Actually, our initial launch, our first 60-day launch was not a huge success. We only did like 40,000 in revenue in our first 60 days. And it was because we were forcing our customers to buy 10 photo packs. So we said, okay, you need to buy 10 photos. It'll be $390. And if we do that, like then we'll have enough money to be able to cover the cost of the shoot. Like I was trying to de-risk everything. I was almost too risk averse when I launched the business. And 60 days in, it wasn't really working. And so I called my lead engineer and my co-founder one Saturday night, and I said, I'm kind of having like a moment of trust the universe. And I just can hear the universe telling me, get rid of the 10 minimum, charge people for one photo. Say you can book a photo shoot right now by buying one photo for $39. And let's try that test and see if anybody buys faster and if we accumulate more customers faster. Let's monitor that cohort and see if what their average order value is. Maybe their average order value will be more than $390. Like maybe their average order value will be higher and I'm missing the point and I kind of am forcing something. But if they see it, they'll believe it and they'll buy more. And so we spent all weekend like rejiggering the whole thing. And then on Monday afternoon, we sent a new email that said, we heard you, this isn't working, $39 to book a photo shoot. When I tell you, I couldn't have done anything to more aggressively change the course of the business than this. This was the decision that changed the course of the business. The average order value was closer to $450.
Because they could
In
go
that,
one now.
because they could just choose, they could start with one, they could book the photo shoot with
Mm.
one photo. And then they'd have the photo shoot. And my previous assumption was proven correct that if they saw it and they didn't have this idea of like photo credits hanging over their head, they would just make the choices that were attractive to them. And they would just buy the things that were attractive to them. And so they were buying the photos that they most wanted. And it was far more than 10. It was an average of 12 in this case. And so I mean, everything changed from the moment that decision was made. If you really look at the like first year's financials, it was like, yeah, okay, the first 60 days, like we made $40,000, but really it was like month 3 to month 12 is when we got to $1 million in like a rapid clip because we had changed how people were approaching the business, the psychology of the pricing, the psychology of the risk that the customer was taking by trying something new and making it incredibly values aligned. And what I mean by that is like our ability to deliver great photos was our responsibility. And if we delivered on that, then the customer would deliver on an order value that delivered to our bottom line. And that kind of values alignment, I think, is ultimately what really transformed the choices we made.
I love this. And what's interesting is you've been able to sustain 40% growth through this entire process. I would love to kind of break down some of those short-term and longer-term sales strategies that you find have been really critical. So one of the things you just mentioned was let's look at, and first of all, giving you kudos because in the first couple months you got to 40,000. There's a lot of Airbnb couldn't do that. So
Sure, fine.
but to be fair, because you also did this before. So I find
Yeah.
as founders, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Like, yeah, but like I should know better. So I'm like giving you your flowers because at the end of the day, that's still badass. But also it's like, okay, one of critical thing was we looked at the pricing structure. Great. What are some of the other things you did? And you even said like it was after that month 3 to 12 when things started really popping off that got to that 7 figures. Were there any other really short-term strategies that were really important and influential in helping you get there? Because obviously the pricing, but you still have to go to market. You still have to do all these different
Yeah.
things. So what was that like?
I think there's two things that we just really invested in, probably more than made any sense on planet Earth. We really thought about email, but not at email as like we need to send really fancy marketing emails. We wrote like very smart text-based emails, emails that people actually want to open. We found that like the more stuff we put in there, the less people wanted to open it. Like the more over designed, over complicated, it was just too much. And so we said, okay, what's actually just like the one thing we can tell people that's important to know right now, and like be really clear and not overdo it. And so email became a huge part of our strategy in that first year. We invested in it so much. We were incredibly focused on that as a growth lever. The second thing that we have been focused on since like really the first year all the way to today, we continue to be focused on it, is growth hacking the journey that the customer goes on. We are constantly A/B testing different things in checkouts, different things in how their on client onboarding experience looks, different parts of the platform where we can just like highlight different things in their menu bar and how does that change their experience. We A/B test like we're searching for some kind of like hidden treasure. If I'm really honest with you, there is nothing we are unwilling to A/B test in our platform. But the result is you find these little leverage moments. You find things that you weren't expecting to find. And I truly think it comes from a place of, don't actually assume the prettiest thing or the thing you're most attracted to or the thing that looks the most seamless is the thing that's going to work. Kind of, it forces this muscle in the business of saying, let's put our assumptions aside about what the customer wants, give them options, and let them tell us how they want this to be. And it really teaches you to become radically open-minded about that customer experience. That, I think, has been in the DNA since day one. It is still happening today. We A/B test so many things still to this day. And I love that rigor around the discoveries that we get. We recently had the wildest discovery about our checkout page, where it was like, if we move this box from the left side of the page to the right side of the page, it doubles the number of people who buy this. Like, great. The world at large says best in class checkout pages have everything in the right hand sidebar looking perfectly aligned. But actually, maybe the best in class thing that the world says is best in class isn't best in class for us. And the thing that's
Yes.
best in class for us is that it's over here on the bottom, because everybody kind of has their eye go towards it when they're looking at their photos. Like, that insight would have never happened had we not gotten into a cultural belief system around challenging our assumptions and being creative about what our choices are going to be.
I love this example because to your point, there's, and this is good, like there's information that's really generalized about here's like example, social media. Here's the best time to post on social media. Here's the best times to send your email to your list. And it's off of just huge generalizations. And then you start realizing everyone's doing that all at the same time. So everyone's going to be at the inbox at the same time. Everyone's going to be
Yes.
on these. So when I told my team, I was like, you know what? Let's try something different. We do off peak times and we're like, what does our customer and our audience really care about? And that worked significantly better for us in terms of engagement. So I love you mentioned this. And I want to go back to this experimentation mindset because that's our third thing for what founders who scale successfully do well is they're constantly experimenting. Yet, as you know, for founders, it is really hard not to get on the shiny object syndrome type of, train, and where you're like, oh, we're going to experiment everything. And you're kind of experimenting for experimenting's sake. It sounds like you have a culture of experimentation, but how do you stay really disciplined and focus on what to experiment? How do you all decide?
I think pairing experimentation with clear core values as a business is part of how you can get to where is experimentation okay and where is experimentation maybe not okay. So, for example, well, for us, one place we do not experiment is in customer support. We believe that like best in class customer support is fast, responsive, and personal. And so if that's how we think about what we're trying to do in customer support, that means that, like, sure, do we try different technologies? Do we try different ticket systems? All of that is true. We can experiment around the edges of how we deliver the service, but what our core values are about that has to be clear in order for us to hit the target. And so it's really about differentiating between the how and the what. How are you doing something and what are you doing? And, it actually, to go back to the product experimentation example, one of the things I often say is like, well, our goal is to find an insight here that makes the experience better for the customer and improves our bottom line. But our goal isn't just to learn random things. So, what are we trying to learn? Like, constantly asking, what are we trying to learn? And that can provide really clear visibility into whether or not something's doing. On the topic of shiny objects, one thing I will say is I do think a lot of founders, I know I have felt this at times, I still feel this sometimes. I become very overwhelmed by kind of playbooks or rule books or ideas of checklists of things that people need to do in order to be great or in order to build their business. And I can especially feel this around social media, right? Like you've posted a video on TikTok. Now you need to prepare that video. So go on Instagram Reels. And then once it's on Instagram Reels, make sure you also publish to Facebook. And do you have it on YouTube Shorts now? And blah, 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 blah. And I think, would I be able to do more experimentation if I posted things on all of those social channels? Yes. Yes, I would. Have I made a strategic decision that I'm just not going to do that because energetically I do not have the energy to do all of that? Yep. And so I've also found for myself personally to get out of the business and just put it back into your own personal, checklist. Where do I get energy and what am I naturally good at? Well, what it turned out is like I was getting more energy from my TikTok audience, even though it was smaller than my Instagram audience. And so I wanted to put more energy there. And that's what I've chosen to do. And so don't just think about these questions as it pertains to the business and all the decisions you make in the business. Your natural resource as a founder is your energy. You have to protect it. You have to be thoughtful about it. Think about how you apply that principle to your own energy as well.
I love this. And I love that a lot of what you keep going back to is that original thing where it's like, okay, what energizes you and what are you good at? And constantly asking yourself, because I think so often to your point, we will do things in our businesses because we think we should. Like I'm very pro fuck the should be's. Like there's things you have to do, taxes, all these other things. But
Right. What are you legally
they're
required to do?
you're
Do
like,
that stuff.
it's like a legal thing. But outside of that, it's okay. If everybody else is doing it, doesn't mean you have to. And so I love that you keep going back to does this energize me? Because at the end of the day, humans run the business, including yourself. You're the main component. So that's super important. And as our OGs know, we talk about this all the time. Only 1.7% of women entrepreneurs have ever scaled beyond 1 million in annual revenues. You've clearly done that. I would love to go through because we've talked through how we got to 7 figures. You did a lot of unscalable things, founder content, email, experiments, so on and so forth. Now I would like to turn to, because you've gotten to 8 figures.
Mhm.
What were the key differences of how you've had to go to market going from 7 figures to 8 figures? What are the key things in the business that maybe worked at 7 figures that did not work getting to 8 figures that you had to become a little bit more sophisticated?
Yeah, there are two big things that really bit me in the butt after $10 million dollars that I didn't see coming actually at all. The first was the first $10 million dollars in revenue we earned entirely through product led growth and direct marketing. And what I mean by that is product led growth is oftentimes this product experimentation that I'm talking about, hacking your product to get the next user, inspiring your users to invite the next user. And then the second strategy was direct marketing. So organic, social, life cycle, and some paid media. So we really focus on these strategies exclusively to get to $10 million. Dollars. After $10 million, the growth rate really started to slow. And I should say we got to $10 million in just over 3.5 years. So it was a very fast progression. And then I saw the growth rate start to slow. I saw the channels and strategies we were using were not scaling in the same way. And it wasn't that direct marketing couldn't work, but we needed to supplement some of that direct marketing. And so there were two strategies I had to invest in rapidly in order to keep growing the business. And the first was I needed to invest in organic search engine optimization, and I needed to invest aggressively in inside sales. And what I mean by inside sales is just people who identify high value accounts and help those high value accounts continue to grow. Once we had nailed inside sales and had seen how the value of that could pay off, then we added account sales. So people actually owning very large accounts and trying to own just a single account to get that to as much money as possible. And in just the last 9 months, we've added now inbound sales. So we now have the ability for someone to book a sales call and talk to a salesperson about their account before they're a Soona customer. So organic search and a sort of staggered approach to continuing to grow sales over 18 months has been what has allowed us to continue to grow at a really aggressive rate over this period of time. Had no idea, right, that the things I used to do weren't going to work and that I needed to bolt on more strategies to keep growing. And I don't know, now we're on this path. I always describe it's like what works from 0 to 1, about 10% of that is going to continue working exactly the same way from 1 to 10. And about 10% of what works from 1 to 10 is going to continue to serve us from 10 to 100. But we have to be open-minded about preserve the 10, find the 90. And so that's how I've approached continuing to grow over these last few years.
I love that. And when you think about, the huge reason we do this podcast is we want women to be able to see the different options for how you can scale. Because back to which I love that you keep mentioning is that, we get so caught up in comparing ourselves to other people's stories, but what might be the path for them might not be the path for you. So seeing different paths and maybe even saying, hey, what Liz did in this regard, I want to do that because that actually gives me energy. Yet what Crystal did over here is also something so people can create their own kind of strategies and playbooks to your point. So
Yeah.
when you think about what your unique visions of success for this business looks like that will create an impact that you care about, what does success in this business look like? If you look out and you say, wow, if we got there, I feel like we've made it.
I already feel like I've made it in a ton of ways. I want to be really
Period.
clear about
Yes.
that. I look at just passing 8 figures alone. I remember when that seemed impossible. And I want to encourage every single person who is part of your community and listening to this to remember that you've got to celebrate all the moments on the journey, because waiting for this penultimate moment to occur is going to actually really make it impossible to have enough energy to get to that penultimate moment. You've got to constantly find the reasons to celebrate. I remember celebrating, signing our very first multi-million-dollar contract. I remember celebrating the very first subscriber on the platform. I remember celebrating hiring my COO. Like, I've always found these moments to say, wow, that's really a moment of personal and professional success, and I should celebrate this moment. And so it doesn't have to be something huge. It can be really, really small. It can also be very personal. It doesn't have to be with other people. It can just be something you do for yourself. Every single time I raised a tranche of venture capital, I went out and bought myself a nice piece of jewelry. That's something that now every single morning when I put this ring on, I think about my Series A, right? And I think about the fact that I made that accomplishment. So I encourage people to do that. In terms of ultimate success, really my vision at this point is to build the ultimate community for creativity in e-commerce. And what I mean by that is e-commerce is considered to be a very transactional business, but actually it's an incredibly vibrant, creative business as well. And a lot of the inspiration for the arts, for what we as a culture are excited about, for what we wear in streetwear, it all starts with, did you buy something on a website? And so I really think about our role in supplying the internet with these millions and millions of photos and videos that support that culture that we're all a part of. And I try not to put like a number on it or a price tag on it. I try to think about things like, how will other people talk about our community? Who will be in our community? What brands will be our customers of that community? And that to me kind of makes it so that it always feels fresh and new instead of like an end point I'm trying to get to.
I love that because it also might limit, because you'll hear about these stories, people are like, I never thought we would get there. And so it's like,
Mm-hmm.
here's how I want it to feel and what I want it to look like. And when we get there, it creates possibilities for what it could actually become. So
Yes.
based on that vision of success, and of course, we've already hit plenty of success points, but where you want to go next. For the folks listening, how can they be supporting you in getting there?
Well, first and foremost, I would really just love if the folks listening would go follow my social media. I don't think you even need to go follow Soona's social media. I think that it would be great if you did, but if you go find Liz Giorgi on Instagram and TikTok, I would love for you to be part of the conversation that I'm always having about building a business and the process of building a business, because this is what I'm doing right now, but who knows what I'm going to do next, right? Like, so much of the really lifeblood of what this company is my journey and a reflection of the decisions and experiences I've had. So I would love that. And then the second thing I would love for people to really do is, I have been thinking a ton about the future of AI and the future of AI images and the future of AI videos and how AI can help us or support us. So I would love if people could go to soona.co/AI and read the ethics paper that I wrote about what I think ethical AI will look like in the future. And I would love if they would send me an email, liz@soona.co, and tell me what they think. Because it's one of the things that's on my mind most right now, that I'm thinking about the most, that I'm strategizing around the most. And I love to hear from other people about how they experience my leadership and my worldview so that I can make good decisions about what to do in the future. So those are two things people could do.